Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I have a fantastic guest with me today, but this lady is really, really special. I have known her, oh, dare I admit it, probably over 30 years. She's a really good friend of mine, and she is quite an inspiration with a wonderful story to share. Her name is Amy Anderson. She is a Pilates instructor, certified dance medicine specialist, founder and owner of Engage Movement Arts, and former professional ballet dancer whose career took a dramatic turn when a devastating back injury left her unable to dance for 2 years. She was 27 years old, and I still get chills when I read that and say it. And at the peak of her career, when she was told by the experts that her injury was career ending and that she would never be able to dance again. Not only did Amy dance again, but she also created a 30-year-long career working in private practice, rehabilitating injuries for both dancers and the general public, while also maintaining a professional dance career part-time. She is currently working with clients, teaching adult ballet classes, and by the way, they are fabulous. I take her class, and creating new works to share with the world. Amy, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. I'm really honored to be on your podcast. I really am.
Well,
And I love
it's an
that
it's
introduction. It's wonderful.
it's an honor to have you here. And it hit me one day when I don't know if it was before your class, maybe I was getting ready to take it or afterwards or whatever. And I was just thinking about watching you move sometimes, when I'm in class. It's almost like you mesmerize me. I get hypnotized by the movement of your body, the length of your legs, the way you carry yourself. And I remember that time when you were going through that horrible injury, and I was going through an injury shortly after that, a back injury. And to see where you are now, just it warms my heart and it makes me so happy.
Well, thank you. That's so flattering. And I am in shock that I'm doing as well as I am, considering how I thought when I was 27 and got hurt. Because you you don't have experience when you're younger, obviously,
Mhm.
and you start learning things. And then when something happens to you, you don't know how to handle it.
Mhm.
The thing about that injury was I had always thought I was going to be a dancer since I was 3 years old.
Mhm.
My mom saw Swan Lake on PBS. I'm going to be a ballet dancer. And your mom's like, "Oh, isn't that cute?" And then I start dancing around. Then she puts me in gymnastics with my brothers because there were so many of us, 5 kids, that it was easy to take us all to one place. And I loved leaping and jumping and all that kind of stuff, but the tricks scared me. And I still wanted to be in ballet. She put
Mm.
me in a ballet tap and jazz kind of thing in a church basement with this woman who I hated the tap and the jazz part. I wanted to do ballet.
Mhm.
And this woman, but I went. And this poor lady, she was in her 60s and she got the flu and she died, which is so
Wow.
crazy. And across the street, Colorado Ballet had a satellite studio when it was first, before it was Colorado Ballet, called Cavillo Parker Studios. And Lillian
Mhm.
Cavillo and Friedan Parker started Colorado Ballet. And so my mom took me there. And then I did Nutcracker, just an angel, scared to death, all this. But I loved it. And I knew that I would never stop. So from a very young age, I had only thought of being a ballet dancer. And so you have this identity that this is you, this is what I do.
Mhm.
And I did it every single day, and there just all the way through high school. And I had some problems though, because when I got into a big company, which was in Seattle, Pacific Northwest Ballet, this was the first time I had like a big crashing blow in my life. I learned that I had my huge dream of being a dancer. I finally got there, and I was so miserable. You're in this big company and there's
Mm.
all these dancers, and I had been at Colorado Ballet and it was smaller and I'd been pushed forward too quickly. So I was
Mm.
doing parts that I really shouldn't have been doing because I wasn't quite finished with my training. And they just threw me out on stage, and I love it. And so you go to this big company and you find out where you really are. And that was very shocking. And the dancers were not nice. There were a lot of people that were, they weren't nice. And I'd never been in that atmosphere really. And so that was hard. And then I felt like I was going to get an eating disorder because of all the pressure about your weight. And I was
Mhm.
thin. but they still pressure you a lot. They're like, well, I don't know if we can give you this part if you don't lose 2 more pounds. 2 pounds on somebody who's 5'9" is nothing. And so, but that kind of thing. And so I felt like I was going to get something. I could tell this is killing me. And so I left and I quit dancing. So that was devastating to me because I lost my identity. And I did musical theater all summer. But the one thing I did was I ate whatever I wanted for the first time in my life. I go to Wendy's and I get a big hamburger and French fries and a Frosty. And I spent the whole summer doing musical theater and I gained 25 pounds. And and what was good about it was after I did that, I was like, you know what? I don't need to do that anymore. And I just quit needing to like overeat. And I think my body was so hungry was also part of the problem. But I was like, and I thought, well, I guess I'm going to be fat now. I just went, because I thought that would never change. And because I just accepted that I was going to be fat, strangely, that helped me. Then the other thing is I ended up at David Taylor Dance Theater, which is a smaller dance company than Colorado Ballet. And I auditioned for David Taylor and a man named Jim Clouser, who you remember, another ballet teacher. This is the first class I took with him. And David and Jim both just liked me the way I was, which was very unusual in dance. Jim worked with me the whole class, and I thought he wouldn't even notice me because I was too fat. And David said, great, when can you start? And because of that, I just started dancing more and I lost the weight because I wasn't under any more pressure. And I'm grateful to both of them for that moment because otherwise I couldn't have danced again because it would have been that eating disorder thing. And I was around a lot of crazy people.
Yeah, just two things that really pop into my head because I do remember all those years ago, and I don't know why I remember this, please don't ask me what I had for breakfast this morning, but I do remember this. Is one time you were talking and telling, how, yeah, you stopped dancing for years and blah, 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 blah for a while. And I looked at you and I said, well, what do you do when you stop dancing? And I was shocked at your answer because you said you cut your hair and you start eating. And then, of course, you mentioned Mr. Clouser, Jim Clouser, and I, of course, remember him.
Yeah.
And I remember, and this, just kind of like stuck in my heart, that when you were told you had to stop dancing, I remember that you said, I don't know if you were telling a group, but I was there and I overheard it or whatever. I was probably eavesdropping. But you said that one of the things that hurt the most was that Jim said to you, Mr. Clouser said to you, oh, Amy, that's such a shame because you're just beginning to really get it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, that was when I was 27, right? That was the injury. Because, yeah, he had worked with me all up until then. And then the injury was, so anyway, I got back into dancing, but it was on my own terms, which I really liked. And I danced with modern companies and David Taylor, and I taught, and I did a lot of stuff. But I myself found that rather than being dictated to by one company, this is what you are, and you're just sort of a body in a costume a lot of times, which makes you not feel like an artist at all, or that you'll ever be one. And that's why you're dancing, is to be an artist. So I felt lucky that that actually worked out for me when I had not envisioned that as I was, that was not my dream. And the big lesson there was sometimes you get your dream and you go, oh, I didn't actually want it. So that's very shocking, but it's okay because you're just learning about yourself. And so I ended up where I wanted to be, but that schedule and that lifestyle, I started to just overwork my back in certain ways. And that's a very long story about how it crept up on me. But my sacroiliac joint got very weak and it would flare up every now and then. I danced through it. And finally, it flared up really badly. And I had just done this one ballet that I had the lead in, and it was like a 2-hour ballet, and it was almost on stage the whole time. And I loved every minute of it. Wow. And Greg, my husband, at the time, he was just my boyfriend. He was dancing at Ballet Arizona, and everybody was tall there. And he goes, Amy, you got to come down here. This would be perfect for you. And so I finished that ballet that we were doing that was so intense. And the very next day, we had a big cast party at my house till 3 a.m. And I got up the next day and drove to Phoenix to go audition. So you're in a car
Oh
and
my
my back
God.
was out and it just set it in. And then I auditioned for 3 days and I was in pain the whole time. They gave me the job. They liked me, got me the job. I drove back. My back was still just so, all the muscles were in such spasm. And I'm just going to do it. And so I took a week off and I thought I'll be fine. I went into class and I started class. My back is still killing me. I hadn't seen anybody for it, no massage, nothing. And then something just went rip. I
Mm.
felt a tear. And it was when I was sitting down after class, I sat down on a bench and it just went. And I thought, oh my God, that's all right. I'll be okay tomorrow. I mean, that's how you think. And it took
Right.
2 weeks for me barely being able to walk, going to rehearsal, laying on the floor and watching rehearsal because I couldn't even stand. And, like Kim Robards was the director of this one company I was dancing for. And she's like, are you gonna be able to do this? And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And for me, I drove home and I was in the car and I just burst into tears and had a total meltdown because I realized how injured I was. And
Mm-hmm.
it dawned on me that this is not going away and
Mm-hmm.
you're in for a road. And that started this whole very
So
lengthy, horrible
just
process.
key points here.
Yes.
And you wrote this down, the dancer's mentality, because, and I'm sure other athletes as well,
Yes.
but especially for dancers, because it is such a competitive field and you've worked your butt off. You have worked so
Yeah.
hard to get there. And, you've had aches and pains before, but, you take a day off or you lay down on the
Yeah.
floor and, boom, everything's going to be fine and you do recover. But it does, that wear and tear does eventually, it's like exponentially building until
Yes.
finally it's like, we're not going to do this anymore. But the importance of being able to pay attention to our bodies and listen to those subtle signals. And that's the same thing happened to me is, I was feeling discomfort and tightness in my low back and did the
Mhm.
logical thing. I ignored it. And then,
Mhm.
of course, ignoring it didn't work because it started to get worse. And I tried stretching, heat, blah, blah, blah. Well, that didn't work either until took just a few months. It was a full-blown chronic pain syndrome that was way out of control. But had I known my body better, and
Mhm.
I wasn't a PT at the time, but had I known and listened to it, maybe it wouldn't have gotten that bad. But on the other hand, having gone through this experience where I'm at right now, I wouldn't be if it hadn't been for that. So
Yeah.
take it away and tell the audience, the listeners, how that pivotal point, I mean, this horrible experience, because even Greg at the time, I think, had to leave Arizona Ballet, if I remember correctly, and come home and take care of you.
Because I was like, yeah. But that started him at Colorado Ballet, where he's been ever since. And it's worked
Right.
out, thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one of the things, with dance and anytime you're doing a high level pursuit where you're really pushing your body to the end, you have pain all the time. And it's hard to tell when it's a pain that you need to really pay attention to, or if it's just you extending yourself. At what point are you overextending yourself? So your pain mechanism and your understanding of your body that way, it's very messed up through dance training or just high level athletics. And it's hard. And that's part of my job right now, is just trying to coach dancers to understand when this is a pain you need to do something about, as opposed to one that you can live with. And I do lectures all over at dance schools about this is how this works, because it's very hard to understand. So, because I was mad at myself and I learned to forgive myself because there was no way that I could really understand how hurt I was going to get. And you're like, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? Why did I keep, and it's just, there was no way for me to know. And
Mm-hmm.
when you get hurt like this back injury, because you can stand up and walk around to a certain degree and you look okay. Like if you're in a cast in your leg and you're on crutches, everyone's like, okay, that you're hurt, or you had a surgery. But this kind of injury doesn't look like anything from the outside, except I'm moving slow and I seem very stiff. So people are like, you look like you hurt, but you'll be okay. And I remember one dancer saying, Amy, just dance and get yourself over it. Like you're, like sinking into it. And I'm like, I can't. I mean, I literally could not. Even if I wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
and other people around me could not understand that.
And
And
I
so,
have to say this for a minute. I'm sorry for interrupting, but that
no, not at
sounds
all.
like somebody who has never really truly experienced
Yeah,
real pain.
exactly.
Hmm.
And so, and that happens. And that's another thing I coach dancers and my other clients who are in a lot of pain is how other people can't understand. And what I notice is people have patience for you being sort of infirm for about 2 weeks, and then they're going to go on with their lives, which is fine. But
Hmm.
that's all that they can really give you. And when you have something that's going to go on for a long time, it's going to be pretty hard. And so, because of that, you're going to try to push yourself out of it too soon all the time. So for that first year I was injured, I re-injured it. It would just start healing and I'd re-injure it because you're like, okay, now I'm over it. Now I'm over it.
Hmm.
And understanding, that kind of sawtooth progression of
Hmm.
getting better was the other thing that I can help people with understand now. But that really killed me because I couldn't believe I would keep injuring it when all I did was bend over and pick up the dog food, knowing that a
Hmm.
20-pound bag of dog food, yeah, I wasn't dancing, but I couldn't do that either.
Hmm.
And I was always like, well, if I'm not dancing, I should be able to. And then I realized I couldn't do anything. It
Hmm.
was horrible.
Well, and I like the way you describe the sawtooth progression because we like
Yeah,
to think of progress as being this lovely straight line trajectory right to the top, and we're going to be absolutely fine. And
yeah,
unfortunately, it does not work that way. Another little memory popped into my head, and I'll never forget this because, as a medical professional, I, was a respiratory therapist for almost 20 years, PT for 20 years,
yeah,
but I know the limitations
yeah,
of the medical professionals and I know the limitations of the experts. And
yes.
I'll never forget, you were telling us a story or you were talking about going to workman's comp. And why don't you take it away and just share that with the audience? Because it truly is,
I,
when you're dealing with a ballet dancer or any kind of dancer, it's a different kind of world in which we live.
yeah, well, it was hard for them because they had never had anybody like me.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things the doctor would do is say, bend over and touch your toes, thinking it was a disc herniation or something, and I would stop at a certain point. Well,
Hmm.
that wasn't the problem because my hamstrings are long. I can put my hands on the floor easily from dancing, but it was my SI joint, which is a different situation. And they would look at me like, what do we do now? You're touching the floor. Oh. And then slowly over time, after many different doctors, and I finally got a doctor who, it's not like he would listen to me. He was a very big ego kind of guy. Kind of, when I first met him, I was really off put by him. But he was the guy who wrote the low back guidelines for workers' comp.
Oh.
And those were all about disc injuries, not anything to do with an SI joint. And I got there because one of my friends, her stepfather was a neurologist, and he said, you need to see this guy. He's the best one in Colorado. So they got me in, and this guy was, it was like a 2-month wait to see him. And I got in like the next day and all that. So I appreciated that people were trying to help me because it had almost been a year now. And he did some good things. Like he said, you need an osteopath. And I had been going to one. But just because you get adjusted doesn't mean it's going to hold. And so
Hmm.
I get adjusted and it would be out by the time I got into the car. And I should have been, there's all these things that should have happened. But anyway,
Hmm.
so just an osteopath wasn't going to fix it. And that was kind of the mentality. Well, your SI joint is out, and it was way out. So they're like, wow, this is really bad. We can see that. But I didn't understand what that meant. And
Hmm.
one thing I feel like that's really important is when you're injured to get information and understand what it actually means in the body.
Hmm.
Because as I learned, that's what helped me get better because I'm like, oh, these forces will create this situation where it goes out. I need to
Hmm.
back off on those, do this. And that helped me learn how to control it myself because it's
Hmm.
all about managing and controlling it as it's starting to heal. And I was always like, well, I got adjusted, so I should be okay. And I'd walk away. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm in so much pain. And it almost made it more unstable.
Hmm.
Um, so, there's all these disconnects between the doctors. And then they
Hmm.
wanted to do injections, which were like cortisone. And I said no, because I said, if I don't feel pain, I'm going to go dance and I'll re-injure it because I've already done that. So I need to feel that it's painful. So I wouldn't take anti-inflammatories and all that.
Mhm.
And they thought I was completely nuts. And there was a level of taking some drugs I think would have helped me, but I wouldn't do it. But there was another level of it because anti-inflammatories also stop some of your healing. So
Mhm.
I think, you know, I tell people do what you need to do, but just have these things in mind. And I
Mhm.
wouldn't recommend somebody just go through total pain all the time. That
Mhm.
wasn't smart. The
Mhm.
pain cycle, you know,
Yeah.
it's tough and it's hard to understand, but understanding what's going wrong really
Mhm.
helps. And so I did learn that. But the funny story, the second PT story that was so funny is 2 years had gone by and I just said, I'm not doing this anymore. I went off workers' comp. And the whole time I had to work because I never understood that I could have had lost wages. And it would
Mhm.
have helped that I wasn't teaching ballet all the time while I was injured.
Mhm.
I also, the Town Hall Arts Center in Littleton, where I had done my last performance that I hurt myself after, had pity on me, and I was the house manager, and they paid me $7 an hour, and you just come in and open the door, you know, unlock the place. The whole rehearsal comes in or the show or whatever, and then you're the last one out, lock it up. And while I was doing that, I sewed costumes for Nutcracker. We did a whole
Okay,
new,
so I have got to just interrupt you again because this
yes,
is, I'm putting myself in your place and trying to
yes,
get into your head
yeah.
is how in the world did that feel to you? Okay,
Hmm.
so this was the last, place that you had done that big performance,
Yeah.
and now here you are opening the door for other dancers to come in and rehearse.
Yeah, it felt really pathetic. Like
Uh-huh.
I felt like I've never been so lost. And
Mm-hmm.
the thing that saved me was David Taylor Dance Theater was doing this new production of Nutcracker, and it was very avant-garde and out there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I went to it, I saw it. Yeah.
I got to design a lot of the costumes.
Uh-huh.
And because somehow David, I don't know, I just said I'll help with costumes. And then I ended up taking the whole thing on and doling out there are all these wonderful mothers of the dancers who were seamstresses and sewed the most fabulous costumes. And they just did what I said. And
Mm-hmm.
then George Peters, who was the set designer, also designed some of the costumes. So
Mm-hmm.
we worked together. And I had a creative outlet, and
Mm-hmm.
that really helped me a lot. So I had a place in the whole thing. And so I'd be sitting there at the Town Hall Art Center sewing sequins very painstakingly on tutus, which I loved doing because I was making this beautiful, you know, thing, and just talking to everybody. And it helped me actually,
Mm-hmm.
even though I was desperate to perform again, but I knew it wasn't possible. And so, of course, I started thinking forward to like maybe I should just go to costume design school and just become a
Mm-hmm.
designer because I actually found something I loved that was creative.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I went swimming every day, even though it was terrible for my SI joint, because
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, everybody says swimming's good for you. And it was
Mm-hmm.
not because I was
Mm-hmm.
just moving my pelvis so much. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everything I did was wrong. And the PTs and all these people were just like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. No one, I would have told somebody, don't swim. That's a bad one for you, like in my
Mm-hmm.
position. Um, but nobody understood the injury that was working with me. So that was also a huge revelation. I'm like, I know
Mm-hmm.
more about SI joints than any of you people because I
Because you lived through it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, even at the time, I'm like, oh, and so I trusted what I felt. And that also is really important when you're healing from something. When somebody's saying you should do these and you think, no, that doesn't work
Mm-hmm.
for me, don't do it. They
Mm-hmm.
were having me do all sorts of weird back exercises that were
Oof.
just making me worse. And no one, like, it was very strange experience. And then when I wouldn't get better or become even more flared up, they'd be like totally stymied, have no clue. So
Mm-hmm.
that was interesting. But I ended up with a good osteopath, and he was just good at doing the adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned to not do anything that hurt, and that was huge
Mm-hmm.
because you just think, well, it hurts, but it'll get better. That is not true. Things don't get better
Mm-hmm.
when you're working right through pain.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the point where you can start doing things again and you get a little inkling of that old pain and it makes you
Mm-hmm.
freak out. And you have to
Mm-hmm.
learn to, you can do it now. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to hurt yourself doing this because this isn't that. So go ahead. And then all of a sudden you build confidence because you understand it better, and then you can eventually do the things that you could do. And one of the hugest parts of getting back into dancing was I had two partners that I had to dance with, and David Taylor, and they were like, we'll just change the choreography for stuff you couldn't do. And that was extremely lucky because that doesn't really happen very often. So that was for me the beauty of being in a smaller company,
Mm-hmm.
that everybody still wanted me back 2 years later. It wasn't like, oh, we forgot you, because that
Mm-hmm.
would normally be the case. And
Mm-hmm.
that everybody wanted me back and they were willing to work with me with the
Mm-hmm.
stuff I couldn't do, because which was taking my leg up behind an arabesque or really bending back.
Mm-hmm.
And so the lesson I learned from that is, don't keep trying to do the things you can't do. Don't get
Mm-hmm.
fixated on that, because 95% of dance I could do. And if I had only worked on those two things, I would keep pushing myself backwards. But
Mm-hmm.
by just ignoring that and, okay, that's not going to be well, and doing everything else, that came back.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to do things that I just never thought I'd be able to do again, let alone be able to dance. And so I quit fixating on the fact that my arabesque was going to be low and I wasn't going to be able to cambre.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what a difference that made. But if I had
Mm-hmm.
only spent time, like the PTs were like, we have to get your leg to go up, we have to get you to do that. And that kept making me worse.
Well, I think the real important take-home message here for the listeners is to pay attention to your body and to really listen, and how much control you really have only on your own healing journey. Because I mean, the same thing happened to me after 2.5 years of just
Mhm.
struggling and going downhill. Instead of getting better, I kept getting worse. And it was when one of my doctors told me, I would never be able to do my laundry, my grocery
Yeah.
shopping the same day, and told me to start applying for disability, forget about PT school, because you'd never be able to do it. And she, bless her heart, was kind enough to explain to me that I was too old to go back to school anyway.
It's just so dumb.
I know, isn't that crazy? And I was 36, and
Yeah.
when I says, "Well, you don't understand. I'm planning on going back to ballet class." Of course, I was never a professional, never wanted to be, but it was something I absolutely loved and adored, and it kept me in shape.
Yeah.
And she laughed in my face and said, "Well, you don't understand. You are a chronic pain patient. You will always be a chronic pain patient. You will never have the life you had. And start applying for disability because you're going to need it, because the arthritis in your spine is just so severe. You're never going to be able to do anything." So,
Yeah.
to have somebody take your hope like that and destroy your dreams and crush
I
your
know.
spirit is absolutely devastating. So I went home and I hit rock bottom, and
Oh,
few
yeah.
days later, it was like, wait a minute. You need to figure this out for yourself, because they're making things worse and keeping you in this pain spasm cycle. So I
Yeah.
stopped taking all the medications, stopped doing all the stupid PT exercises and stretches,
Yeah.
and did kind of what you did. I would get down on the floor every day. I knew enough Pilates, I knew enough movement, and I
Yeah.
would dissect the movements and just see what makes me feel better, what makes me feel worse. Okay, then I'm not going to do those movements anymore. I mean, it was frustrating, but it was an incredibly empowering experience at the same time, because it took about 9 months, and then
Yeah.
I was pain free. I was overweight, I was stiff, I was out of shape, but boom, I had a starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But that whole idea of what can I do,
Right.
capitalizing on that. So you're always
Mhm.
like, whenever I'm working with a client, I'm like, let's find out what you can do that doesn't aggravate whatever it is. And
Mhm.
then we have a baseline of where to go. And then I start learning, where not to go, and, as I'm working with them. But if you have that, like, these are the things you can do. You will not hurt yourself doing this. So
Mhm.
let's start with that. It makes them feel better because all of a sudden they have something to start working with.
Mhm.
And then you, as a practitioner, do as well.
Mhm.
And you watch them gain confidence because they're starting to learn how to control it. Because my job was only to get people in control of their own injury as much as I
Mhm.
can, including referring them out. Because I'm like, you need to
Mhm.
get massage. This is a good person for this. Here's a
Mhm.
good person for that. You figure out which one's helping you the most. But I
Mhm.
can't do this. It's not me doing it. You're moving yourself.
Mhm.
So I am not fixing it. I hate it when people say that. They'll come and go,
Yeah.
you need to fix me. And I'm like, no,
Nope.
I don't do that. But I
Mhm.
can help you fix yourself And if
Mm-hmm.
I can't, I know somebody who can because I'm hooked
Mm-hmm.
up with all these great people. Um, so, they're not there for me. I'm there for them. It's not my
Mm-hmm.
ego. It's the same thing in the ballet class. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
people get like, well, I didn't want you to be mad at what about it's me get all upset about something. And I think I really aggravated you in class. No, it was really weird because, I'm having fun helping or doing whatever for you. I
Mm-hmm.
get plenty out of that. You're
Mm-hmm.
not there to make me feel better. It's
Mm-hmm.
just weird.
That's
Just,
really
oh,
funny.
you're going to be mad at me. I didn't do, and I'm like, well, if you didn't do your exercises, okay, that's fine with me.
I have another little story I wanted to share with the listeners too,
Yeah.
because, okay, full disclosure, while I was in this horrible pain spasm cycle, I did end up in a clinic, a physical therapy clinic, and you were working there as
Oh,
a
yes,
Pilates person. Yeah. So,
I
and,
didn't.
so we were, definitely commiserating with each other. We would have these little arguments when you would say, no, I think that your pain, your injury is worse because it's going all the way down your leg. And I'm like, no, I think yours was worse because you couldn't even get up off the couch. At least I could move. But it was this funny dialogue that we'd go back and
He's
forth.
worse than me.
Right? Somebody's got to be worse than me. But the one time, and it was a huge gym, and
Yeah.
you came in one time and you actually had a student you were working with as well. And it was the first time somebody put me on a ball, an exercise ball.
Mhm.
And so I'm sitting on this ball, and it was just like, oh, I can move.
Mhm.
And we both started moving and like bouncing really gently and stuff. And then the student grabbed a ball, and the three of us were bouncing around like happy idiots, laughing and just, waving our arms and stuff. And people would
Yeah.
kind of come in and just look at us and walk away. But that was the first time
Mhm.
in, probably 2 years, I felt like I was able to do something, and it was really fun and entertaining. And of course, as soon as I experienced that, I bought a ball. And
Oh, yeah.
if you
Oh,
come
yeah.
down to my girl cave here, I've got balls of every size
Oh,
all
yeah.
over.
Stuff I showed you. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
just because, yeah, you find what works. I know, I remember that time. It was so interesting. I learned so much at that clinic
yeah.
because I did have, there's a Pilates instructor there. Although the way I've learned almost everything in my life is always kind of backwards. I get thrown
Hmm.
in. Oh,
Hmm.
you'll be able to do this. Some people have confidence in me, and I'm like, but I don't understand what I'm doing. And I can
Hmm.
fake my way through something, but I didn't learn it. It started with
Hmm.
ballet that way. I didn't really learn it until I was like 22
Hmm.
when I finally was getting training and understanding what I was doing. And I think that happens to people, but I just didn't know what the foundations were. And the same thing happened with Pilates. I didn't
Hmm.
know Pilates at all. And all of a sudden I'm teaching it. The main
Hmm.
instructor had left. I'd just gotten certified by this crazy, like, just at St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco, where they had a dance medicine division, but
Yes.
spent 6 hours there a day watching people exercise, trying to help them, and two tutorials, and then that was it. And I got certified, and I'm like, but I don't know anything. Went
Hmm.
back to the clinic, and all of a sudden I have all these really injured people, and I don't know anything. And so even with you, I didn't know anything, Cheryl, except that I knew what it was like to be in pain. And
Right.
so,
Well, I think that's a really important part of the healing process is if you're working, if somebody's working with you who
mhm,
can really commiserate, and I don't want to say commiserate, but has that level of understanding of what it's
yeah,
like. I mean, the only thing I could do, I swam, because I was a swimmer,
yeah,
and it didn't seem to aggravate,
yeah,
my pain. And I could walk the dogs, and that was it. And I remember walking the dogs, and I would oftentimes run into one of the dancers who would take Mr. Boyette's ballet class, and Clasina, and I would see her
yeah,
because she was a runner as well as a dancer, and she would just stop and she would talk, and she said, "Oh, we miss you," and you could just see the
mhm,
pity in her
mhm.
face and in her
Oh,
eyes, and I would just we'd talk for a while, and I'd go home and I would cry and consider slitting my own wrists. It was like just horrible. And when I finally did come back to ballet class after, I healed myself, and I, got on the right track, got the right people. And she looked at me and she says, I didn't think you would ever be back.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
she said, well, that makes two of us because I didn't either.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to wear a t-shirt that said, "Don't ask me about my back." because people would see me and their eyebrows knit and they get all, and I don't want that. I didn't
Yeah.
want that. And I know there's two sides to it. One is they feel bad for themselves in a way, like, what if that was me? And that's
Right.
what happens. And I understand that naturally because I do it. What if that was me? Oh my God, it would be so terrible. And that's what's going through their head towards you. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I felt like I'm spending more time reassuring people I'm going to get better than I'm like, you should be reassuring me. You should be
Mm-hmm.
supporting me, but I'm having to sit here and go, no, I'm going to get better. It's just going to take a long time. Why
Mm-hmm.
did I have to do that? That was very
Mm-hmm.
frustrating to me, but I realized it wasn't, had nothing to do with me. That it
Mm-hmm.
was really about them kind of putting themselves in my place and thinking, oh my God, that would be so horrible if that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that never
Projection.
happens to me. And, sure, I can understand that. So, I got over that
Mm-hmm.
because that doesn't help anything. But, I also flared up again when I was 40.
Mm-hmm.
And, or no, I flared up again when I was like 37 and I quit dancing at the time. But also I was burned out and there's some other factors that are long
Mm-hmm.
stories that I just not get into. And I just thought, well, if I'm not dancing, I'll be fine. And I just taught Pilates. I got deeply into dance medicine. I did every workshop I could take. I
Mm-hmm.
studied all this stuff. And so that was good. But even teaching Pilates, I felt my back go. And then I was like, it's not going to come back. Like
Mm-hmm.
something inside of me said, Amy, this is going to stay this way. That's it. Something just gave way. And that's when I did prolotherapy, which is a ligament
Mm-hmm.
reconstruction technique, if people don't know about it, through injection. And it's regenerative therapy is what they're calling it now. And it actually really did save me.
Mm-hmm.
It was great, but it took 10 sets of injections. Usually it takes 2 to 3 on people, but I was so bad that he had to do 10 sets and you do one a month. But it took like a year and a half to do it because he
Mm-hmm.
kept extending the time. So let's just wait. And I learned a lot about how to rehab myself
Mm-hmm.
in a different way from that than I had
Mm-hmm.
before. And then it took another year and a half to really get back so I didn't have any pain. And then I
Mm-hmm.
danced tango for 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
like this whole other professional career. And
Mm-hmm.
I was 43 when I started tango.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I started it when I was 40, when I was starting the prolo and I could barely walk. So the first few
Mm-hmm.
years didn't really count, but I really got into that and I did
Mm-hmm.
that for 15 years. And then it was just sort of this thing where I just didn't want to do tango anymore for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of reasons, but not because I couldn't dance. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
I got back into ballet.
So when you
And
got back into ballet, were you just taking classes? Like, you stopped tango and then you would start taking classes. How
yeah,
did that
was the
go?
pandemic sort of shot tango. I mean, that
Oh,
was it.
yeah,
And
that's
I was
true.
already burning out on it and it was kind of
Mm-hmm.
drawing away from it anyway. And I
Mm-hmm.
was really thrilled. I'd been so over people because tango, you're around people all the time. You have to be really social about everything just to get somebody to dance with you and all this. And for me, that was very exhausting. I'm not really a social dancer, and there's so many things I love about it, and I recommend it towards anybody. But when I go into dance, it's a different place in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always want to talk and socialize. I want to express myself. And in
Mm-hmm.
tango, it's more of a shared thing with people. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but in ballet, you go in there and you can say hi to people. Once the class starts, you dance and you are all inside of yourself
Mm-hmm.
and then extending back out. And it's sort of a meditation for me mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I got a lot of that from tango, and there's a lot of things I loved about it, but I really needed to be in the solitude of dancing alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started taking class because Colorado Ballet had one in the morning, and I just I could take it because I was on staff, with the
Uh-huh.
dancers, and I thought, well, it's free, so I'll just go. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I really found that I enjoyed being back in ballet. I felt like I was myself again in a way that I hadn't felt for a really long time,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt good doing it, which was very strange to me because I thought there's no way I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
feel good. But it felt great, and I was so thrilled that it
Mm-hmm.
felt good to dance ballet, which was the thing that I got so hurt on, blah, 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 that it really grabbed me again. I
Mm-hmm.
never had any intention of teaching ballet. But
Mm-hmm.
when the studio owner was leaving, she said, I don't know who I'm going to get to teach this Sunday class. It's my favorite class because it's just a great energy. And she goes, I need somebody who's going to match that energy. And nobody wants to teach on Sunday. And it was my day off with my husband. That was our one day off we had together. But I love the studio. I just moved my business to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I have to help make this thing go because we have to keep the studio running. And so I started teaching and I
Mm-hmm.
was nervous about it. And I thought, oh my God, I taught ballet for 20 years, but I haven't taught for like 17. But because of all my experience and understanding the body better and just having a different mentality, I think that's why it's fun for me. When
Mm-hmm.
you're 20 something and you're teaching adult students, it's just something you're doing for money. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm teaching them because they need to dance. And
Mm-hmm.
it bothers me so much that people think adults don't need like corrections and encouragement. And there's no reason they can't dance better than they're doing and enjoy
Mm-hmm.
it more.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't just go, well, that's as good as you're going to be because you're studying ballet too late and blah. It doesn't matter. Like
Mm-hmm.
who cares if your leg is high? But you can connect your body better. You can hold your center better. You can do so many things better, and then
Mm-hmm.
you'll enjoy it more. And so
Mm-hmm.
it just drove me nuts. I would take these classes, and the teachers would just give the class and ignore the students. I mean, like you have a room full of students, and you're completely ignoring them, and you're letting them just get away with stuff they could fix. I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand that. So I'm in there and I'm like, let's dance, let's have fun, let's do this. Don't do that like that way. You could be better at this, because I can't not do
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you teach Pilates, you're instructing people all day. And
Mm-hmm.
that side of me, it just comes out. I have to
Mm-hmm.
say something. I can't watch that and go, I know this person, if this somebody just said something, would do it. But I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that you actually ask questions, because I don't know what people are
Mm-hmm.
understanding. And Cheryl taught this as a question about the arm and the joint and how you disassociate your arm from your center. And I could have talked about that for a long time. And I tried to give this really short answer, but I'm like, does anybody even think that way? Like in this class, where are they in their mentality? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just keeping up and doing the combinations is all people can do. And
Mm-hmm.
I get that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
good
Mm-hmm.
because just being able to make your mind connect your body to enough to
Mm-hmm.
organize that together, but then add these details and all this stuff, some of the people can do that. And there's
Mm-hmm.
professional dancers in there that need to be reminded, and some of them have
Right.
told me like, I took your class and you said this and I hadn't thought about that in years.
Mm-hmm.
And so even
Mm-hmm.
the professionals need the reminding.
Right.
I do. I mean, I do.
Okay,
uh,
so a few points here.
yeah.
First of all, when I heard that well, first of all, I want to give the name of the studio. It's the Denver
Yeah.
Dance Center
That's,
on Second and
um,
Bayard.
no, second and Alcott really.
Okay,
But
Second and Alcott. But
Bryant is the cross street and
okay.
Alcott's sort of a little side street, but it's on Second Avenue, and Bryant, I think, would be.
So if anybody wants to check out the website, go to denverdancecenter.com. Great website. You can, find a list of classes, blah, blah, blah. Amy's profile is on there because that's where her business is too. And of course, she teaches that Sunday class. And when I found out that you were teaching, it was just like, I was blown away and I thought, I have got to take this class. So I told you before, even before we started recording, just to watch you move, it's almost like poetry in motion. And just to, and again, now you're 60, I think, right?
51.
61.
Yeah.
I'm 67. And thinking about where we were 30 years ago, both of us, and the fact that we can move the way we do is just such an incredible gift. But that
Yeah.
came from a lot of hard work, research, understanding, self-awareness. And your classes they are my favorite. I love your classes
Oh,
because it's number one, your sense of humor. Number two, your approach, let's just dance. Number
mhm.
three, the fact that you do give corrections
Yeah.
and appreciate and recognize the fact that, a body, it doesn't matter how old it is, it
Mhm.
can always improve.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that from my 80-year-olds. I ended up with all these like senior citizens, and they weren't 80 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but and some of them were. I started them, and that watching people improve their bodies, and even people who don't have faith in their mind, they're not believing it. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, the doctor said come here, and I don't know, and I'm supposed to get a knee replacement." And
Mm-hmm.
like I had this one guy, and he was 82, and his wife had just died, and he'd spent the last 10 years watching her die of Alzheimer's, and it was
Oh,
really horrible. And the first thing he said to me was, "I don't even know why I'm here. I just want to be with my wife.
oh,
She died, blah, blah, blah. I don't see any reason in living." And I'm like, oh, this isn't going to go well. And the only reason he came is he went out to lunch with a friend and they were sitting in a booth and they had to move the table and get three waiters to pull him out of the booth because he couldn't move. He was big. He was like a 6 foot guy and he had a big belly and no
Oh.
strength. And so his friend said, you have to go to Pilates. And
Mhm.
his friend had been seeing a different Pilates instructor at this clinic.
Mhm.
And so anyway, I get this guy and I get him on the trap table and we do some stuff. And he's the whole time just like, I don't know why I'm here. And he's so
Mhm.
like morose and depressed. And I have to rig up the springs so he can pull himself up and I can push him up, because he couldn't even get up off the table. He came once a week for an hour for a year
Uh-huh.
and he was supposed to get his knee replaced. And so he had a cane. And the whole time he's like, there's no belief in this man doing it because he doesn't know what else to do.
Mhm.
And I don't believe it either. I'm like,
Mhm.
well, this is better than nothing. At least he's doing
Mhm.
something. That's all.
Mhm.
I don't think anything's going to help him. And he walked down the hall to go to the bathroom, which was way down the hall. And he came back after, a few minutes and he goes, I got out of the stall and I was looking for my cane and I realized I forgot it. He walked all the way down the hall. He didn't even realize he didn't have his cane. And so he started coming twice a week and he did great. I mean, he did great until he was 89. He got a heart attack. He didn't die, but they took his driver's license away and he
Mhm.
didn't want to like do a car service or something to get there.
Mhm.
But that's what made me realize it doesn't matter. And this is like not your, oh, I believe I'll get better. It was nothing like
Mhm.
that. It was just
Mhm.
your body wants to be better. It's
Mhm.
like sort of geared that way. And there's finally a tipping point, but you don't
Mhm.
know when that is. So why not
Mhm.
just keep trying to make it better? It's not going to be like when you're 20, but it doesn't matter. Like to
Mhm.
me, I don't want to be like I was when I was 20 because I got really hurt. And when I
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
27, I thought
Mhm.
at 61 I would be in a wheelchair. I
Mhm.
didn't think I was going to be able to be anywhere near as well as I am now.
Mhm.
And I still sometimes have trouble with my back. I had
Mhm.
a, we got a new dog and he was too big for me now. I didn't know
Mhm.
this. And he was huge prey drive and just like, he'd been a street dog. So when he was out and he was walking, you could not control him. Totally pulled my back out. And I worked with him for 3 months every day for like an hour in the morning, an hour at night, trying to
Aw.
get him under control. And I loved him, but I had to give him up, which was heartbreaking. But my back
Mhm.
was a wreck. And so I'm like, oh my God, I can still have this injury back. So now I have a new thing where that pulling motion is still not good for me. And I had been ignoring my back for years because I hadn't had any trouble with it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I've worked my way out of that. Um, and it was hard. Again, another sort of semi-devastating experience because he
Mhm.
was such a cute dog and he loved
Mhm.
me. And but no. And of course my husband at the time had had a knee surgery, couldn't walk. He couldn't even help me, yeah, let's get a new dog. Good idea.
Good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. um, so anyway, it was just dumb, but I know the injury will always be with me and it's just
Mhm.
part of who I am. And it's done a
Mhm.
lot of really good things for me because I learned so much to help other people.
Mhm.
And I've learned a lot just about who I am and myself.
Mhm.
So, when you get something that's just so horrible like that, you have to know that somewhere down the road, if you
Mhm.
keep at it and just try to understand and don't judge yourself too hard, um,
Mhm.
you'll come around and things will get
Mhm.
better. They will
Mhm.
get better. And even though I didn't believe it, I didn't think I would
Mhm.
ever get better. And I think that's part of the process where you just go, I'm just not going to get better. Okay, fine.
Mhm.
So what can I do? And that was actually helped me move
Mhm.
forward instead of just like grinding away at the same things that weren't working.
And
Um,
that, I think that's a really good key point to highlight is that, even though you thought you weren't going to get better,
yeah,
what could you do?
yeah,
Instead of just throwing in the towel,
yeah,
throwing in the towel and saying, okay, this is it. I'm just going to sit here and
yeah,
deteriorate,
yeah.
focusing on what you are able to do, your ability rather than the disability.
Yes, absolutely. And that also is a change that you make in your mind when you've
Mhm.
exhausted the other options.
Well, true.
Sadly, it's just a process you have to go through. And I can't make somebody go through the process sooner. I can just draw their attention to it
Hmm.
and go,
Support.
Yeah, this is, yes, what's happening to you. And I think sometimes people need to go ahead and just say the most devastating thing and have a terrible attitude and have somebody go, oh, I know, I understand that you feel that way. Because
Yeah, rather than
it's
saying,
right, it is
oh,
that bad. Yeah,
yeah. There's nothing worse than having somebody either marginalize or dismiss you when you're in
yes,
pain or suffering or something
yeah.
is really not going right in your life.
No, it's terrible. And so I think it helps people when you just go, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
This is bad.
Yeah.
So here's where we're going to start. Let's see what we can do,
Hmm.
so they at least have some sort of foundation to start building on.
Hmm.
Because it's so hard. I mean, it's really hard. And I do feel for people when they have these kind of situations that just like
Hmm.
pull the rug out of their life, out from under it.
Hmm.
Um, it's so often though, in story after story is
Yeah.
the point where somebody really changes and finds something that's better than anything for them.
Hmm.
I wish it didn't have to be that way,
Hmm.
but somehow that's just how we're built. We have to have
Hmm.
this huge adversity and then we really make profound changes and then you're just so much happier. Like
Hmm.
I didn't realize I wasn't really happy.
Hmm.
I was okay, things were good,
Hmm.
but I wasn't really happy because I didn't have the self-confidence that things that can be really bad and I can do it. I can get over it. And that's what I like about being 60 is I have a lot more confidence. I'm a lot less full of anxiety and
Hmm.
like I remember during the pandemic the building I was in, the Living Arts Center got sold and so all of a sudden I had been buying into this building and all this stuff and it's just no place to put my business. And I do this show called Shoes, and I was doing it. I had to gather up everybody, and we performed it in Carbondale and I was in a temporary space and oh, you're supposed to be out of there by August 1st and this is like mid-July and I have no place to go.
Hmm.
And um and I just didn't have anxiety about it. I'm
Hmm.
like, I'm going to finish my show. I will find a place. If I don't have my business for a month, I
Hmm.
won't die.
Hmm.
And I just didn't stress about it. And while I was up there, I get an email from Chris, who's the owner of Denver Dance Center,
Hmm.
that their Pilates room was open. And I'm like, oh, great. And it's closer to my house. It's close to Colorado Ballet. It's got parking. It has everything I needed,
Hmm.
which I couldn't find before. And I came back and I saw the space and I remodeled it and I moved in and it's been perfect for me.
Hmm.
And I think I learned and I learned this during my shows because that's always very stressful, is you can have all that anxiety, but everything goes the same way. It's like,
Hmm.
you still have to get these things done. This still has to happen. If it's going to mess up, it's going to mess up. Quit having anxiety about it. It doesn't help
Hmm.
at all.
Hmm.
And the first time I did shoes, because I've choreographed like little pieces, maybe the longest one 7 minutes, but to do a whole hour and a half show, that was new for me. And
Whoa.
direct and choreograph it and organize it. And I remember every night I'd come home and, David Carradine in Kung Fu
Hmm.
had just come up on Prime or something. And I would watch an episode of that because it just reminded me that he had all these things happen, but he was always calm. And I'm
Hmm.
like, Amy, stay calm, just stay calm. And the show went great and then ended up doing it. And I had less trepidation and fear about a lot of things because you push yourself and you didn't freak out. And then
Hmm.
you're like, oh, I can do this. Wow, that's great. And so learning that anxiety and trepidation and all of that is natural, but don't let it overtake you or keep you from doing things. Because you
Hmm.
can have so much anxiety, and I've had that. I'm like, oh, I just can't do it. Oh my God, it's too scary.
Hmm.
And now I'm like, well, it'll be fine. I'll figure it
Hmm.
out. I can get help. You're not alone. People want to help. And
Hmm.
that's the other thing is um, Frances McDortmund in this movie, I forget what it was called, but her son is going off to be with this rock band, and
Hmm.
she's this professor, and she goes to her son, "Be bold, and mighty forces will come to your aid." And I forget who wrote that or what it was from, but it was so funny at that moment. But sometimes I would think of that, just like go ahead and people will come because they
Hmm.
want to be part of things and
Hmm.
have community. And so why don't you just start building something and then it does help. People will
Hmm.
help. So you're not always alone. And that's the other thing is there's a lot of isolation now, but I don't think people want to be isolated.
No,
And,
no.
and so but you have to go out and do something. You can't,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it is.
We're social animals. We need each other.
Yeah.
And yeah. I think that's why there's so much depression and anxiety in the world.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I do this show, is just because
Yeah.
when we tell our stories and we share our stories, we're connected
Yes.
with each other and we find
Yes.
out, hey, we got a lot more in common than we think we do or that we're
Yeah.
told, so it's just really a lot of fun. So Amy, how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find
Oh,
you? How can they connect with you?
well, I'm not a big social media person, but I have a website and it's engagemovementarts.com. So it's those three words all run together. And you can get a connection to Facebook, but I never post on my Facebook page. But then you can get my whole story. You can get the hours, you can get, how much the appointments cost. You can get everything that I'm doing is on my website. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can write me an email from there.
Mhm,
My email is amy@engagemovementarts.com. So that's
mhm,
easy. My phone number's on there. I'm happy to talk to people or whatever they need,
mhm,
because it's just simpler for me. And I
mhm,
don't spend a lot of time on social media, just because I just don't. It has good and bad things, and I got sort of turned
mhm,
off from it
mhm.
when I made a comment to somebody that was supposed to be encouraging, and they came back, they misunderstood me, and it was somebody I knew well, and they were so evil. I was like, whoa, I'm not ever posting again. Yeah, complete.
It's amazing what people will post
Yeah.
or what people will, air quotes, say
Hmm.
when they're, behind a screen that they
Yeah.
would never say to your face.
100%. And so I realized, because that's the culture of social media, I don't want to be,
Right.
but I do like it when I'm having a show. It's a good way to advertise a show because a lot of people see it and you have a
Hmm.
reach. And so I like it for that. So I don't want to say it's all evil, but that
Hmm.
side of it, I don't want to have anything to do with.
Yeah.
And because it just creates acrimony and we don't need it.
Right.
Nobody needs it. Nobody needs it. And it doesn't really help people when they're expressing that,
Hmm.
and just being so contentious. It doesn't
Hmm.
actually help them, and then what it puts out really is destructive. So I
Hmm.
just can't do it
Yeah.
myself. And there's a lot of good things on social media, though.
Hmm.
Pictures of your dog. That's how I found the one dog that
Hmm.
we adopted that I loved. But I don't ever get a dog sight unseen, is what I learned. You have to go meet them and walk them.
Do a trial run, do a trial walk.
Well, I have to say, the dog that we got before that, we got off of the internet, and she was a perfect dog from the minute we got her. We didn't have
Hmm.
to train her. We didn't have to do anything. I took her everywhere. She went to every rehearsal. She
Oh,
went to
how
work. She
fun.
went to all of our workshops with anatomy and clay. Yeah, she was great everywhere. And that's how
Hmm.
we could have a dog and be super busy, because she was part of our lives.
Hmm.
So now like, I thought, well, I'll just train him to be with us all the time, not this dog.
Aw.
Yeah. But he ended up in a really good place, way better than I was. So
Hmm.
he didn't get just stuck in a shelter.
Yeah,
He's at
it worked
somebody's
out.
home. Yeah, yeah. So he's
Well, Amy, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story, your pearls of
yeah.
wisdom. Fantastic. You gave the listeners a lot to think about and a lot of encouragement.
Oh yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. This was so fun, and it's so delightful to see you doing this. You're just amazing. So
Oh, thank you.
we're all lucky you have Cheryl. Just so you know.
Well, and we in ballet class are all lucky that we have you. Love your classes, love your corrections, love your approach to teaching. And I know that a lot of the way that you teach has been influenced by your journey and by the work that you do, with other people. So thank you so much for that too.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. Well, thank you, Cheryl. See you on Sunday.
Well, I won't be there this Sunday. I'm going
Come
tomorrow.
Sunday.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Come
but
Sunday.
yeah, I'll be there. So
Yeah.
everybody, thank you for listening. Do share this episode with everybody you know, especially if they're struggling with pain syndromes or they're thinking that, oh my gosh, you're getting old and stiff, you're 40, and don't even go down that road because look at us. Amy and I, we're kind of like the poster children for you can
Yeah.
do anything that you want to at any age. You can recover from anything as long as you give your body the right environment to do so, your body can heal from everything, your body and your brain. So do remember that. Check out Amy's website. And in the show notes, I also have included a link to a lovely interview that she had done on Voyager Denver. So, you can always find Amy, even though she's not real active on social media because she's smart. And thanks again for listening. And remember, your body has an incredible capacity to heal itself. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.